A quiet, desperate man lies awake in a small stone house in the hill country of Galilee, and he gives the exact reason why. Matthew chapter 1 records the moment. The angel says, "You are to give him the name Jesus." The deepest problem is not the empire. It is the exile. The true enemy is not the foreign army marching through the streets. It is the fracture running down the center of the human soul. The angel is pulling back the curtain on the cosmos and revealing that humanity is held hostage by a force far more terrifying than a Roman centurion. We are held hostage by our own rebellion. We are bound by the darkness we have invited into our own chests. And so the rescue must match the reality of the disease. The boy growing in Mary's womb will not lead an insurrection. He will not sharpen swords in the desert. He will not storm the stone fortress of Antonia. He will not ride a war horse into the capital city to slaughter the political elite. He will march directly into the wilderness of the human condition. He will not shatter a Roman spear. He will shatter the curse of Eden. He will not overthrow a human king. He will overthrow the kingdom of death itself. He will not drive out the legions of an earthly empire. He will drive out the decay that lives in the marrow of his people. The chains holding humanity hostage are not forged from Roman iron. They are forged from human autonomy, because he will save his people from their sins. It is a verse you have probably heard 100 times. Joseph wakes up in the dark. The carpenter breathes in the cold air. Knowing the world outside his window, desperately wants a warrior. But he is going to raise a savior of a completely different kind. He is going to raise the remedy to the human heart. But that massive disconnect between the rescue the world demands and the rescue heaven actually sends did not end in the first century. If you look closely at the architecture of your own prayers, you might find the exact same misunderstanding that haunted first century Israel when you are sitting in the pale glare of a phone screen at 2 in the morning, trying to figure out how to navigate a crisis that is keeping you awake. When you feel the sudden, physical drop in your stomach as a doctor reads a scan result. When you are gripping the steering wheel of your car, driving to a job that is slowly crushing your spirit. What exactly are you asking God to save you from? Like the crowds waiting for a warrior Messiah in Jerusalem, you are almost always asking for a circumstantial rescue. You are asking heaven to manipulate the external pieces on the board. You want the difficult person removed. You want the bank account replenished. You want the medical diagnosis reversed. We hear it read on Christmas Eve, printed on greeting cards, and sung in carols. And because of that deep cultural familiarity, you want the modern equivalent of a Roman legion marched out of your life so you can finally breathe again. This is not a malicious error. It is a deeply human instinct. But when we demand that God fix our circumstances without touching our souls, we are asking for a surface-level bandage while ignoring a lethal, internal bleed. We feel the weight of our own personal empires. The empire of anxiety that tightens your chest before the alarm even sounds, or the empire of resentment you feed every time you replay an old argument in the shower. We beg for rescue from the painful fallout of these empires, yet we furiously defend our right to remain on their thrones. The true oppressor is not the circumstance you are trying to escape. It is the autonomy you are trying to protect. If heaven had simply sent a problem solver to fix the political, financial, and physical crises of the ancient world, that rescue would have expired. A healed physical body still eventually ages and returns to the cold earth. A replenished bank account is eventually spent. A defeated political empire is always replaced by a new one. Circumstantial rescue is entirely temporary. It treats the symptom while leaving the underlying disease completely untouched. Most people read right past the words without feeling their weight. Most people assume Jesus is simply a given name. Yeshua did not come to offer a temporary reprieve. He came to perform a permanent extraction. He came to strike at the root of the human fracture, pulling us out from under the tyranny of our own rebellion and bringing us into a wide, open space of actual freedom. But to see how that massive spiritual extraction actually works, you cannot just look at the manger. You have to watch what happens when he finally walks out of the carpenter's shop and steps onto the public stage. 30 years after the angel speaks in the dark, the carpenter finally puts down his tools. He walks out of Nazareth. He steps into the public square, and he begins to act out the exact meaning of his name. He does not pick up a sword. He does not march on the Roman fortress. He walks straight into the places where the curse of Eden has left its deepest scars. A man covered in leprosy falls in the dirt. The skin is crusted and pale. Jesus reaches out his hand. He touched the untouchable. The flesh turns soft. The man is rescued. A storm violently shakes a wooden boat on the Sea of Galilee. The wind roars. The sailors scream, tasting sea salt and panic. Jesus stands up in the bow. He speaks a single command. We treat it like a religious label. We use it as a standard title we attach to the end of our prayers. She crawls through the dust to touch the fringe of his coat. The bleeding stops instantly. Her body is rescued. A demoniac screams in the tombs of the Gadarenes. He cuts himself with sharp stones. You can hear the chains clinking in the dark. Jesus steps off the boat. The dark spirits flee into a herd of pigs. The man sits clothed and in his right mind. His mind is rescued. These are not random acts of compassion. They are acts of war. Every time Jesus heals a blind eye, every time he multiplies bread on a grassy hill, every time he calls a rotting corpse out of a stone tomb, he is giving a physical demonstration of a spiritual reality. He is showing a conquered people exactly what Yeshua looks like. He is pulling humanity out of the crushing, restricted spaces of disease, chaos, and death, and bringing them into the wide, open space of life. But the crowds misunderstand the miracles. They see the multiplied bread, and they want a king who will always keep their bellies full. They see the healings, and they want a physician who will make them invincible to Roman swords. They see the physical rescue, to make sure they clear the ceiling. We assume heaven simply handed down a holy-sounding identifier so the world would know what to call the Son of God. And they try to force him onto a political throne. They want him to be the savior of their circumstances. They do not realize he is marching toward a completely different altar, because fixing the external symptoms of a dying world will never be enough to stop the bleeding. If the human problem was simply a lack of moral instruction, heaven would have sent a philosopher. If our deepest fracture could be repaired by better habits, the solution would have been a stricter set of laws. In the 1st century, the religious elite actually believed this. They taught that if every person in Israel perfectly obeyed the Torah for just one day, the Messiah would arrive and shatter the Roman occupation. They built a towering system of rules, heavy, exhausting burdens you could physically feel in your aching joints, as you tried to measure out the exact distance you were allowed to walk on the Sabbath. They believed the cure for the nation was rigorous, flawless obedience. But behavioral modification is not salvation. You can scrub the polished ceramic of a poisoned cup until it shines in the light. You can sweep the broken glass off the floor and arrange the surviving pieces into a beautiful pattern. But no amount of external cleaning changes the chemical reality of what is inside. We are constantly trying to manage our own darkness through discipline, through therapy. But if you look closely at the language the angel actually spoke into that dark room, you start to see something the cultural reading completely misses, through trying harder the next morning when the alarm goes off. But discipline cannot raise the dead. The biblical diagnosis of the human condition is far more devastating than a list of broken rules. Sin is not a behavioral problem you can manage. It is a terminal condition you cannot survive. This is why the name Yeshua carries such unprecedented weight. When a lifeguard dives into the freezing, violent water of a riptide, he does not swim out to hand the drowning man a manual on proper stroke technique. He swims out to take the dead weight of the dying person onto his own shoulders. Jesus did not come to teach humanity how to swim. He came to pull us from the water. To save his people from their sins meant he had to go to the very root of the disease. He had to bypass the political symptoms and address the terminal illness directly. He had to step into the ultimate restricted, crushing space where human rebellion inevitably leads the cold. Breathless, dark of a stone tomb. The crowds wanted a king to crush the Romans. But a dead Roman soldier does not heal a human heart. The only way to Yasha humanity The only way to actually perform the extraction the angel promised in that dusty workshop was to let. In the ancient Near East, you did not name a child because you liked the way the syllables sounded. The empire do its absolute worst. And that leads to the only place a rescue this massive could actually be finished. A carpenter hears a word in the dark, and a prophecy is set in motion. A nation waits for a sword, and heaven sends a child. A leper falls in the dirt, and his rotting flesh is made entirely clean. A crew screams in a violent storm, and the chaotic waters go completely flat. A demoniac cuts himself in the tombs, and his shattered mind is finally brought to peace. A crowd demands a temporary, political king, and a savior marches toward a Roman execution. An empire does its absolute worst on a wooden cross, and the root of human rebellion is extracted forever. One name, one rescue. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the carpenter in the dark room. Joseph was a builder by trade. He had thick, calloused hands conditioned by a lifetime of measuring carefully, cutting straight lines, and fixing what was broken. He was a man who knew how to make things right. And yet, the name he was commanded to speak over his son was a quiet, devastating reminder that the deepest fracture in the human condition is something we absolutely cannot fix ourselves. If you are in a season where you are exhausted from trying to manage your own darkness, if you are desperately asking God to change a circumstance, begging Him to march a Roman, you named a child to lay down a prophecy, you named them to describe a circumstance, or to declare a destiny, legion out of your life, while furiously protecting your right to remain on the throne of your own heart. Stop scrubbing the poisoned cup. You do not need a behavioral manual. You do not need to try harder to swim. You need to let the rescuer pull you from the water. If this opens something inside of you today, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who is completely exhausted from trying to save themselves. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God who refused to give us the shallow rescue we demanded reach into the crushing spaces you cannot escape on your own and bring you out into a wide, open place where you can finally breathe. The name is not a label. It is a diagnosis. When Joseph woke up the next morning, the cedar and the cold earth smelled exactly the same. The night air is thick with the smell of cut cedar and cold earth. He is a builder by trade. The Roman soldiers were still patrolling the dirt streets outside. The crushing taxes were still being collected. But the carpenter knew something the empire did not: to feel the shockwave of what happened in that dream. You have to strip away the English translation you are used to reading. You have to peel back the Latin and the Greek that have smoothed over the rough edges of the biblical text for 2,000 years. You have to step out of the modern world and listen to the exact word the angel used, spoken in the language of a conquered, desperate people. Because the angel did not say the word Jesus, the name millions of people whisper in hospital waiting rooms. The word they sing in crowded auditoriums is an anglicized version of a Latinized version of a Hellenized translation of a Hebrew reality. If you trace the ink backward through history, you watch the syllables morph. When the New Testament authors sat down to document the life of the Messiah, they wrote on rough papyrus scrolls in Greek. The Greek language, however, possesses no direct equivalent for the sh sound native to the Middle East, and its grammatical rules require masculine names to terminate with a sharp ss sound. So, the writers took the name Joseph, gave his son. His hands are thick and calloused, conditioned by a lifetime of measuring carefully, cutting straight lines, and making things right. And they phonetically translated it as Iesus. Centuries later, Roman scholars translated those Greek texts into Latin, changing Iesus to Iesus. Fast forward another 1,000 years. The texts move west across the European continent. The English alphabet evolves to distinguish the letter J from the letter I, and a hard, thick consonant takes its place at the front of the word. Iesus becomes Jesus. This transformation is not a corruption. It is the linguistic footprint of a story crossing borders. But in the process of translating the letters, the raw definition of the word became encased in amber. In our modern context, a name is mostly aesthetic. You choose a name for a child because you like the cadence of the vowels, or perhaps to honor a beloved relative. The meaning is an afterthought. You might read in a baby book that a name means strong warrior or peaceful, smile at the sentiment, and then never think about it again. Today, when we use the English name Jesus, we are using a proper noun. We treat it as a standard identifier. Much like calling someone John or Michael, the ancient Hebrew imagination did not work that way. In the biblical framework, nomenclature is destiny. A name is inextricably bound to a person's character, their core function, and their ultimate purpose. When God changes a biblical character's name, He is not updating a record. He is altering a trajectory. But the problem resting heavy in his chest tonight cannot be fixed with a plumb line or a saw. So, when the messenger of God steps into Joseph's dream, bypasses the parents' legal right to name their own child, and dictates the syllables straight from heaven, he is laying down a mandate. The command is not a suggestion. It is a job description. Joseph did not hear an English proper noun that night. He heard a living, breathing vocabulary word. He heard a word that he used in his everyday life, a word that the ancient prophets had been shouting into the darkness for hundreds of years. But to comprehend why that specific job description would have stopped a first-century carpenter's heart in the middle of the night, you cannot just look at a dictionary. You have to look at the terror waiting in the dirt streets outside his window. The shadow of the Roman eagle falls heavy across Galilee. Rome does not just govern. Rome consumes. The empire extracts the wealth, the labor, and the dignity of every province it swallows. You can hear the rhythmic, terrifying clatter of legionary armor marching on the stone roads. You can feel the cold metal of the imperial decrees demanding you travel miles just to be counted and taxed. You can smell the blood and the sweat baked into the wooden crosses erected on the hills just outside the city walls. His betrothed is pregnant, and he knows the child is not his. He has already made his decision. A centurion forces a local farmer to carry his heavy pack for a mile. A tax collector seizes the barley harvest before it even reaches the family table. A zealot sharpens a dagger in a dark alley. A mother weeps over a son who spoke too loudly against the governor. This is not a political inconvenience. It is an existential suffocation. Israel is a conquered people, living as hostages in the very land God promised them. And Israel is holding its breath. They wait. They pray. They read the ancient scrolls of the prophets by candlelight, tracing the promises of deliverance with trembling fingers. But the deliverer they are picturing is a military commander. They are waiting for a new Moses to step up and drown a new Pharaoh in the sea. They are waiting for a new David to pick up a stone and crush a new Goliath. They want a king who rides a war horse. They want a Messiah who brings a sword. In the first-century Jewish imagination, the cry for salvation is not a quiet, abstract prayer about going to heaven when you die. It is about surviving tomorrow. It is physical. It is geographic. It is violent. Salvation is the shattered shields of your enemies. Salvation is the temple doors swinging open without a Roman guard watching from the fortress above. He will break the marriage contract quietly. He will spare her the public humiliation, the literal stones that the religious law demands. So when the messenger stands in the dusty workshop and speaks a name to Joseph, that literally means rescue. The carpenter's mind must immediately snap to the empire. He must think of the Roman occupation. He must picture a political revolution born from his own house. But the angel is not announcing a military uprising. He is about to drop a vocabulary word that redefines the entire battlefield. Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, holds the exact phrasing of the celestial mandate. The angel stands in the quiet room and says to Joseph, "You are to give him the name Jesus." But the name actually vibrating in the air that night is the Hebrew noun Yeshua. Yeshua translates literally as salvation, to rescue, or deliverance. It is a word the Jewish people knew intimately, but it is a derivative of an even older, more primal root word. The noun is built on the foundation of the Hebrew verb yasha. When you trace yasha through the rough parchment of the blind Old Testament scrolls, you do not find a gentle, spiritualized metaphor for going to heaven. You find physical, tangible rescue. The verb carries the literal imagery of being pulled out of a crushing, restricted place and being brought into a wide, open space where you can finally breathe. When the Israelites stand panicking on the muddy shores of the Red Sea, staring back at the choking dust of Pharaoh's approaching chariots, and he will walk away from the life he thought he was building. Exhausted by the weight of a shattered future, Joseph finally closes his eyes, and Moses declares that the Lord will deliver them today. The verb is yasha. When King David cries out from a cold cave in the wilderness, surrounded by men holding spears and hunting his life, he begs God to yasha him. It is the heavy-duty rescue word of the ancient text, used exclusively for situations where you are entirely powerless to save yourself. If seeing the raw in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 21, the messenger of God delivers the final instruction. Read in our modern English translations. The sentence feels simple, almost administrative. You are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. But the word that actually hung in the air of that dark room was the Hebrew proper noun Yeshua. Yeshua is not a passive, decorative title. It is an active, muscular noun derived directly from the ancient Hebrew root verb yasha, and yasha means to deliver, to rescue, to bring into a wide and open space. It is the language of a lifeguard pulling a drowning man out of violent, suffocating water. It is the exact same root word the ancient writers used in Exodus chapter 14, when Moses stands on the shores of the Red Sea, watching the chariots of Pharaoh sink into the depths, and the text declares that God saved Israel from the Egyptians. It is a word soaked in the history of physical liberation and national survival. And then, the atmosphere in the dream shifts. A messenger steps into his sleep. The angel does not just tell Joseph to take Mary as his wife. In fact, if you were to read the Old Testament in Hebrew, you would find another famous leader named Yeshua, the man who took over after Moses died, the man we call Joshua in English, who literally led the Israelites across the Jordan River and into the Promised Land. If realizing how much depth and history is buried beneath our English Bibles is stirring something inside you, you are exactly who this channel is for. Hit subscribe and drop a comment below with what you are learning. Because every week, we dig past the translations to find the bedrock of the text. So the angel hands Joseph this massive, historically loaded word. He hands him a name that carries the entire weight of the Exodus story. A name that promises a new Joshua will lead a new generation into a new kind of freedom. For a Jewish man living under the boot of the Roman Empire, hearing the name Yeshua, spoken by an angel, would immediately trigger visions of political deliverance and shattered chains. But then the messenger does something entirely unexpected. He takes this ancient, violent word of deliverance, and he attaches it to a brand new enemy. The angel tells Joseph, "You will call his name Yeshua, for he will yasha his people. He will save his people from their sins." The rescue is not a military campaign. It is a spiritual extraction. The angel uses the vocabulary of war, but he changes the battlefield entirely. The angel delivers a very specific set of instructions about the child growing inside her. He tells the sleeping carpenter exactly what to name the boy, because the messenger from heaven is diagnosing an oppressor that is much older, much deeper, and much more dangerous than the Roman emperor. Joseph lies perfectly still on the woven mat. The scent of dry cedar and cold earth hangs heavy in the small room. Outside, he can hear the distant, rhythmic footsteps of the night watch crunching against the gravel. The heavy silence of the Galilean night presses against the stone walls. But inside the carpenter's mind, the universe has just split open. Yeshua, he will yasha his people. He will save them. Joseph knows this word. His entire nation has been weeping this word into the dirt for centuries. He expects the next word from the angel to be Rome. He expects the next word to be Herod, or Caesar, or the tax collectors who are currently bleeding his neighbors dry. He expects a declaration of war. But the angel pivots. He delivers a prepositional phrase that completely rewrites the history of the world. From their sins. The messenger from heaven is looking at a man crushed by political oppression, and he is telling him that the government is not his primary problem. He is looking at a nation drowning in poverty and violence, and he is diagnosing an illness that goes infinitely deeper than physical suffering. Salvation is not a theological concept you debate in a religious school. Salvation is what happens when the iron boot is finally lifted off your neck. The water goes entirely flat. The crew is rescued. A woman bleeds for 12 years. The crowd presses in, suffocating and hot.